Welcome, everyone. Good morning on this beautiful, kind of winterish Flagstaff morning. You are indeed at Beacon Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Cassie Dakan. I'm the Worship Associate today, and we have a guest Reverend from the San Francisco Bay Area, the Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern, who will be delivering our sermon this morning. Good morning. Good morning, Reverend Amy.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
So I will take us through all of the beginning rituals, we'll call them, here at Beacon, and then, of course, Reverend Amy will carry the sermon. The title of today's sermon is Judaism without Zionism. And you'll learn more about this artwork soon. It's actually a paper cutout that Reverend Amy creates. And for today's chalice lighting, as Unitarian Universalist, we light this chalice in solidarity and a kindred spirit with other Unitarian Universalist congregations here and around the world. And I have these words. Why has light been such a constant symbol of the divine? Perhaps because light itself cannot be seen. We are aware of its presence when it enables us to see other things, such as beauty, love, and the faces of each other. So we do welcome today Reverend Amy Zucker Morgenstern, who is currently living in the Bay Area and a minister in Santa Rosa, UU congregation in Santa Rosa. I'm not reading that to you because I know you can read it yourselves. She has served another congregation in the San Francisco area and in Vermont, some congregations in Vermont. She is an artist. She is working on her theology and arts degree. And she and her wife live in San Francisco, and they have a college-age daughter. And we are happy to have her here today to deliver her sermon, The Entire Torah, Judaism Without Zionism. And I think I'm prepared to have my eyes very opened. Thank you, Reverend Amy.
Thank you. It's really lovely to be here. And I just want to give thanks to Reverend Pat for welcoming me, for inviting me and saying, yes, you can come via Zoom, which is a real pleasure, even though I'd love to visit y'all in Flagstaff in person sometime. And thanks to Linda for that very appropriate introduction. I did not realize that this is the week of Advent that is denoted peace. So that is very meaningful, as she pointed out. Thank you so much. So, a story. This story is told in Genesis 18 that God was completely fed up with the people of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, not for reasons of homosexuality, that was added much, much later. For their many sins, he said, I'm going to destroy these cities. They are irredeemable. And having just chosen Abraham to be the father of a great nation, he decided he should tell Abraham about this and said, Abraham, I am going to destroy these cities. I will spare your cousin, Lot, and his family, and then I'm going to wipe out these cities, which are irredeemably evil. Abraham was troubled by this, and he said, how can you, the creator of justice, the creator of all, destroy the good along with the evil, the innocent along with the wrongdoer? What if there are 50 good people in those cities? Will you not spare the cities on their account, you, the author of justice? God said, all right, For the sake of 50 people, I will spare these cities. Abraham was emboldened by this and said, far be it from you to lack mercy and justice. What if there are only 45 people who deserve to live in those cities? Will you not spare the cities on their account? And God said, for 45 people, I will spare the cities. And the story goes on, Abraham growing bolder and exacting a promise from God that for the sake of 10 righteous people, he will spare these cities. This is the earliest story I remember learning about in my Hebrew school years, growing up as a young Jewish child. And it stuck with me and embedded a couple of lessons deep into my bones. One is that justice and mercy and compassion are such important values that we should challenge God himself if there is a risk of injustice or a lack of compassion being committed. Another is that this is part of what it means to be Jewish, because Abraham has just become the father of our people. Abraham is considered the first Jew. His election by God is incredibly important to the Jewish people. And one of the first things he does is summon up his deep moral sense and bravely challenge even God. In fact, Abraham's grandson, Jacob, is going to go on to have his name changed by an angel of God to the one who wrestles with God. And the Hebrew for that word is Yisrael, Israel. And later on, of course, when the Jewish people who founded Israel decided to create this new state, that was the name they gave it. The people, Israel, the people who struggle even with God, if that is necessary. Moving forward to Exodus, here's a story that gets told oftentimes in the Passover Seder. You may know that the story of the Exodus, the escape from Egypt with the power of God and the leadership of the prophet Moses is the center of the Seder. It is the story told at Passover each year. And after the people escape from Egypt, they come to the shore of the Red Sea and the army is coming up fast behind them. And oh my gosh, what are they going to do? And as you may know, Moses lifts his staff and the waters part and the people walk through on dry land to the other side, and the army rushes in after them. And after all the Israelites are safe, Moses lets the waters return, and the horses and chariots and all the army are drowned. There's a little interlude then when the people sing songs of praise and thanks that they have been rescued after generations of slavery. Now here's the story that often gets added to that. It's called a midrash, a later gloss on a story from the Torah, from the first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. That's often a kind of poetic, or it's a kind of embellishment, but sometimes it's much more challenging than that. This midrash says, at the time that the people got safe to the other side of the Red Sea, and they were singing and delighting, the angels began to celebrate. And God turned to them angry and said, those are my children. The works of my hands are drowning. How can you celebrate? And what this story tells me is, again, not only that mercy and compassion are foremost, but there's an implicit challenge, again, to the tradition. The tradition tells this story of the people are saved and their enemies, at least the army of their enemies, is wiped out. But somebody, a later person, a rabbi, was disturbed by this, felt that the story was incomplete and did not satisfactorily reflect all of Jewish values, and had the chutzpah to put these words in the mouth of God, to say God himself would chide the angels, to say, these are my children. And so, of course, another lesson of this midrash that we tell often as part of the Seder is we are all kin, even enemies, even those who would harm one another have a kinship in all being children of one God. And if, like me, you no longer believe in that God, we can still believe in the unity of humanity. And one more story before I get to Zionism. The story is told of one of these rabbis, the rabbis who wrote the midrashes and the sections of the Talmud, the whole development of the law and lore that interprets the Torah. The story is told that a man, a scoffer, went around to various rabbis saying, if you can teach me all of Torah while I stand on one foot, I'll convert to Judaism. And of course, a couple of rabbis sent him packing. And then he came to Rabbi Hillel, who is celebrated as one of the wisest of all rabbis of the thousands of years of Jewish existence. And he says to Hillel, he stands on one foot, he says, Rabbi, teach me all of Torah while I stand on one foot, and I'll become Jewish. And Hillel looks at him and says, whatever is hateful unto you, do not do it to your neighbor. That is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Now, I should say before I go any further, there's an old joke that Jews tell about themselves. That is, where you find any two Jews, you find three opinions. I, of course, am not giving an authoritative version of Judaism. This is my Judaism. I was raised in a quite observant family in Connecticut in the late 20th century, and this is this person's perspective. By the same token, I rebel at anybody's telling me that this is not a legitimate interpretation of Judaism, which sometimes is one of the accusations that gets thrown around when the very tender issue of Judaism and Israel and Palestine and Zionism comes up. So here is my version. And a very personal story, because growing up with a fairly liberal Zionism, not a really gung-ho Zionism, but a sort of background assumption that support of the state of Israel is tied up inextricably with being Jewish. Over the years, that has actually caused me to become quite alienated from Judaism. And with some shame, I say it was not until these last couple of years, the war and the blatant genocide against the people of, especially of Gaza, to a lesser extent of the West Bank, that I have grappled with that. And ironically, paradoxically, it has enabled me to reclaim Judaism in a very deep way. So Zionism, I'm not going to try to give the whole history of Zionism any more than I'm giving the whole history of Judaism, but Zionism comes along in its modern form, largely in response to anti-Semitism in Europe. Anti-Semitism has been a fact of life. Pogroms, the medieval church's persecution of Jews. It has been very difficult to be Jewish forever, and very particularly in Europe, where Zionism cropped up in its modern form. One of the things that really drove Theodor Herzl, who's known as the father of modern Zionism, to propose his solution of a Jewish state was the Dreyfus Affair, which was a case of a very distinguished officer of the French army who was Jewish, a man named Dreyfus, being scapegoated and framed. And it made many people who had formerly felt safe. Oh, I'm French, I'm German, I'm English, I'm Russian, I'm Polish, as well as Jewish. It made them feel, well, maybe I'm not really safe here. If Dreyfus could not be safe, maybe we will always be aliens in these lands. And then, of course, A couple of generations later came the Holocaust, and the crisis that brought about the creation of the modern state of Israel, the proof positive that Jews could not count on Europe to be a safe place. And indeed, today, I don't always feel that the United States, to which so many people came as a haven, is a safe place. And the proposal was made, again, a vast simplification, but a proposal was made by the UN to partition this formerly British colony into a Jewish and Palestinian section, the Arab section for Palestinians who are already living there, just as there were Jews already living there. And it was a very unequal settlement, not to mention unequal against the Palestinians. Not to mention that it's deeply problematic to take any land that is already occupied by people and forcibly give it to another people. Problematic by Jewish teaching, by all the stories that I have just related to you, stories that say that we are kin, that mercy and compassion are foremost, that we should challenge the received tradition when it fails to say this, that we should challenge even God if there does not seem to be enough mercy and justice in the world. And over again in Jewish legal teachings and ethical debates, it is made clear, no matter how much you may need something, you cannot forcibly take it from someone else who also needs it. The saying goes somewhere in the Talmud, when there's one of these debates, I'm giving an example, but that might not be the exact one, but you and I are walking in the desert and you have a bottle of water that probably will get you to safety. And I'm going to die if I don't drink that water. And there's no more reason I should die than you. Do I have the right to take that water from you? The teaching is said over and over again, no, I do not. I do not. And the saying goes, who is to say whether my blood is redder than yours? Maybe your blood is redder. So here we have people living in this land, people of red blood, people who need their land, who have rights. And I think, what would I have done if I had been living then in the 40s, in this terrible, agonizing moment in Jewish history, in human history? And I hope that I would have said, this solution is not Jewish. It is not true to what we are taught. It is not true to what is beautiful in our tradition, the wisdom and the ethics that we are taught, for us to force some people off their land so that we might have safety as much as we deserve it. We need to find another solution. Now, another caveat I want to give is that I'm not saying by this that the state of Israel, now after its decades of existence, should just dissolve. As Cassie said, and as we say in our services, we are living on land that was forcibly taken from people as well. I come to you from Ohlone land that was taken from the Ohlone at the point of a gun. So now what do we do? I'm not saying that we dissolve all these modern countries, but surely justice and compassion and the teachings of this beautiful tradition of Judaism call upon us to do much, much better than we are doing as US Americans and as the state of Israel. For me, it's caused me to question Zionism right down to its core, to the way it was the state was founded to begin with. And having done that, I realize how much I've, over the decades, let Judaism fade into the background for me. I mean, obviously, I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister and other traditions are important to me. But also, it's been uncomfortable to even reclaim Judaism because it's so entangled with Zionism. And to recognize, far from being entangled with Zionism, I feel like there's a contradiction there. That all that I loved about my Jewish tradition teaches me not to be a Zionist. And I feel much freer now to practice these teachings that were given to me and discover what kind of world then are we going to make with our neighbors. as difficult as it will be. So one more little story. If you'll show that art again, if you'll show the slides there, Mike, for me, please. Thank you. So as Cassie said, I make art, and this is a piece I was inspired to make a year or two ago when I learned, again to my shame, something I had not known in all these years, which is that it is a common practice, not only for settlers in the West Bank who are illegally there and backed by the Israeli government, but also for members of the Israel Defense Forces to destroy thousands and thousands of olive trees that are tended by Palestinian families, that are their livelihood and that are the glory of the desert, these beautiful trees that live for hundreds and thousands of years. Judaism has something to say about that as well. And I was inspired to respond to it and to use a particularly Jewish art form. This form of paper cutting goes way back in Eastern European Judaism, which is where my ancestors came from. I'm not super good at it yet, but the quote on the left there above this thriving olive tree is, "The trees of the fields will clap their hands," which is a favorite phrase of mine from Isaiah about how nature itself will rejoice when all goes well. And there it is below in the Hebrew. And this tree is surrounded by hands planting a seedling, and by shovels, and by the birds and the insects and so on that live in a thriving olive grove. Judaism has something to say about trees as well. I was always brought up to believe that that planting trees was one of the ultimate ethical actions, especially planting something that will not even bear fruit in our own lifetime. It is this symbol of how we care for people yet to come and for an earth that is in the future, just as we benefit from trees planted before we were born by people who are now long gone. And in fact, Judaism, aside from that lovely passage from Isaiah, has some things to say about the care of trees. For example, in the Torah, there's some instruction about the ethics of war, that even when you are laying siege to a city, imagine the walled cities of the Middle East, when you are laying siege to the city and there are trees, an orchard around the outside that presumably, when not besieged, the people of the city tend and eat from, we are taught you can eat the fruit of those trees while you are besieging the city in this act of war, but you may not destroy the trees. You may not chop them down. It's like there is this ethical recognition, even in the ethics of war, that there are crimes against people in destroying trees that are unthinkable. To destroy somebody's livelihood, to destroy the earth around them. And also there is the additional crime just against the earth itself, against the trees and all future people. And Judaism says, you may not do this. And this principle is summed up by one of the great ethical philosophers of Judaism, Maimonides, what he would have called himself Moses ben Maimon. He's a 12th century Spanish philosopher. He said one of the central ethical principles of Judaism is do not destroy. And so that is the second half of the diptych here. An olive tree that has been hewn down, that has been torn up by the roots as by a bulldozer. And above and below are the passage in English and in Hebrew, do not destroy. And then symbols like an axe and flame and the scoop of a bulldozer or backhoe and a little frame of nothing, because that is what we are left with when we tear down our neighbors, supposedly in defense of ourselves. Thanks. That's you can move on from the slide now. I'm so moved by this tradition and inspired by this tradition to be a better person. This does not mean I have any easy solutions to the tragedy that is Palestine and Israel. Just that, a very big just. For me, Judaism itself is a guide out of that dilemma toward morality, toward kindness, towards mercy, and towards repair of the unimaginable destruction that has been carried out since the occupation of Gaza and the West Bank over 50 years ago. And for me, the joy of this is that this tradition, unchained from a Zionism that it always opposed at the heart, this tradition can truly blossom and come into its beautiful and wise and inspiring ethical force. And for this, I pray that it will be so. Thank you.